Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this ordinary meeting of Wingecarribee Shire Council on Wednesday, the 20th of September. I can remind everybody that this meeting is being recorded and webcast, and additionally, if you have mobile phones, if you could turn them on to silent or turn them off, if you don't mind. Acknowledgement of country. Wingecarribee Shire Council acknowledge the Gundungurra and Tharawal people as the traditional custodians of this land we now call Wingecarribee Shire. I pay my respects to elders both past, present and emerging. I'd also like to extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders present here or watching today. Statement of ethical obligations. As Administrator, I'll undertake the duties of the Office of Administrator in the best interest of the people of the Wingecarribee Shire Council area and act faithfully and impartially in carrying out the functions, powers, authorities and discretions vested in me under the Local Government Act 1993 or any other act to the best of my ability and judgment. I am committed to the declaration of conflicts of interest in relation to items listed for consideration on the agenda or which are considered at this meeting in accordance with the Code of Conduct and Code of Meeting Practice. Apologies, I assume there are none. Adoption of minutes. I would move that the minutes of the ordinary meeting of Council held on 16 August 2023 be adopted as the correct record of the proceedings of the meeting and declare that carried. General Manager, declarations of interest?
There are no declarations of interest, Mr. May.
Thank you very much. There are 2 minutes today which were circulated last night, so I don't intend to read them. The first one relates to the General Manager's performance review. There are, as a result of that review, there are 7 recommendations, and I would move that the minute be received and recommendations be endorsed and declare that carried. The second minute relates to the usual community update. I would move that the minute be noted and declare that carried. I would just, before we start the meeting, I'd just like to thank the General Manager for arranging that the Mountjoy Border issue be held over until 5 o'clock. At 5 o'clock I intend to move into Committee of the Whole to allow everybody to be heard. You may recall that I think the first time Mountjoy Border was dealt with, I indicated that it was unfair to students who were at school not to be able to be heard, and it's an important issue. So thank you for facilitating a 5 o'clock, and I apologise if anybody came a bit earlier in anticipation, but I'm sure people will generally agree that in the spirit of consultation it's better that everybody be heard at the same time and everybody can hear what other people have to say. General Manager, we now move to matters listed for consideration at this meeting. Apologies. Item 9.1, 2022-23 draft financial statements.
Thank you, Mr. May. Mr. Conrad, the Acting CFO, will introduce this item. Thank you.
Thank you, General Manager. The purpose of this report is to present the draft financial statements to Council for release for audit. Council's draft financial statements present a solid outcome for the 22-23 financial year, despite the extreme economic conditions, with an operating result for the year of $20.3 million. Council also invested $62.8 million in critical infrastructure. All performance measure benchmarks were met except for the operating performance ratio. This is the result of economic pressure from inflation, which is exceeding our rate peg substantially and having an impact on items such as depreciation and generally the cost of doing business. One of the significant matters to note was the storm and flooding events from February, June and September 2022, which were declared natural disasters. Councils were able to access funding through the Disaster Recovery Funding Arrangement, or the DRFA, program. $15.6 million was spent over the 2 financial years on the DRFA-related works. The nature of the DRFA is that the funding will only be received after councils DRFA claims are assessed by the Reconstruction Authority New South Wales, and Council funds these works upfront. Between the DRFA claim and other outstanding grant funds, Council's carried $25.5 million in grant-related receivables on its balance sheet at year-end. In order to maintain a positive unrestricted cash balance, a temporary release of $25.5 million from internally restricted reserves is proposed. It is important to note that this is a timing issue where Council has completed significant works with funds only expected after the 30th of June 2023. Once the funds are received from the funding body, the funds will be returned to the internally restricted reserves. No externally restricted reserves will be released as part of this process. Council's adopted policy requires an unrestricted working capital balance of $5 million. In endorsing the financial statements to be released for audit, it is recommended to have some of the general revenue funded projects funded from the SRV reserve amounting to $1.44 million, which will bring the working capital position to $6.01 million. Thank you.
Just got a couple of questions. The listing of these financial statements at this meeting, that has been endorsed by the Internal Audit Committee?
Yes, correct.
The External Audit Committee, I should say. And just for interest, and I hope I'm not asking a question that if the council didn't have $25 million to fund all these works for the, it appears, a grant money from state and federal, and I don't criticise them, take any grant, but if we didn't have the money to fund that, what would happen?
It's a very broad question. I think in short, probably some of the other works programs would have had to be restricted or cut, but otherwise, the money that's sitting in reserves at this point, that's why we've utilised those.
I was just thinking, you wouldn't want to be a small rural council, which was cash-strapped. Yeah. Anyhow, look, it's something that both the General Manager and I have taken up at both the state and federal levels about the amount of money that is owed to us for storm damage, and we'll be having another go on Friday, as I understand it. Okay, when the $25.5 million is returned to the internally restricted reserves, can that be reported in a quarterly financial statement so that the council knows that the money has been returned? I'm not suggesting that it wouldn't be, but I think for the benefit of those in the community who take an interest in the council, it would be a good idea.
Yep. What we might also suggest is that we do more regular reporting, or part of the quarterly budget review statement, that we report on outstanding grant debtors. Just that will also flag that at that level.
That's even better. Yeah, that's even better. Thank you. There's no need to put that into the recommendation. That'll just happen. Thanks very much. Okay, in relation to item 9.1, the 2022-23 draft financial statements, I would move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 1, 2, 3 and 4 of the business, on page 8 of the business paper, and declare that carried. 9.2, sale of surplus operational land. General Manager.
Thank you, Mr. May. So Mr. Kloppers, the Manager, Business and Property Services, will introduce the item.
Good afternoon, Mr. May and those attending. Mr. May, on the 15th of February 2023, Council adopted its property investment policy and property investment strategy, which were developed to enhance and diversify Council's long-term operational income. Diversification of Council's income sources will support Council's long-term financial sustainability, of course, and allow for continued delivery of quality services to the community. In line with the objectives set by the policy and the strategy, Council has undertaken a review of Council's operational land. This report provides details of 4 Council properties for consideration for possible divestment and recommends that Council undertake a 28-day public notification period in relation to disposal of the identified properties. Objections to be tabled at future meeting, of course. we commend the recommendation to you.
I originally was going to defer this matter in toto, but now having had a closer look at the properties in Elizabeth Street, I think there's 42, I think I counted, the car parking spaces. I think this is, premature to look at those two sites up in Elizabeth Street. The council is going to commission the Moss Vale Town Centre Master Plan, which will also include car parking. I've got to say, I don't finding car parking in Moss Vale all that easy, personally. And I know there's some car parking spaces up the end, but when they're full, sometimes you've got to drive around a bit. I just think this is very premature. And also, what's to say that if this Woolworths application, has it come in, the Woolworths application yet, has it? Or yeah. Well, if it's approved, and that's not a matter for me, it will change the dynamics potentially of the CBD in Moss Vale. So, look, I'm going to amend the recommendation that the possible disposal of 48 Elizabeth Street, Moss Vale, and 56 Elizabeth Street, Moss Vale be deferred until completion of the Moss Vale Town Centre Master Plan and associated car parking studies. And the second part, 8 Etheridge Street, Mittagong, and Wilkinson Street, Berrima, be deferred to allow the administrator to undertake site inspections. And can we get that up, please? You can't see what's happening. He turns one on and the other one goes off. Thank you very much. Can we... It'll come? Okay, I can read it now. But if we can have it a bit bigger next time round. Thank you very much. I declare that carried. The next one is Destination Sydney Surrounds Visitor Information Servicing Report.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. May. Back to Mr. Kloppers. Thank you.
Thank you, General Manager. Mr. May, during 2022, Destination Sydney South and Surrounds commissioned a visitor servicing report. The intention behind the study was to inform state and local government visitor economy and tourism policy going forward across the broader region, so therefore not just us, although Wingecarribee served as the test case and the pilot for the broader report. Mr. May, the report recommended that the physical facility, the Visitor Information Centre, be or remain. The report then makes further recommendations around matters such as visitor experience, engagement with stakeholders, strategy and related matters. Those are detailed in the report and in the item. The report consulted broadly in creating the report, and subsequent to the release of the DSSS report to us, officers here consulted with regards to the response options our council have in relation to the recommendation of that report. This took the form of things such as online surveys, to more than 1,000 organisations engaged in the sector, as well as physical meetings and targeted stakeholder groups. The minutes are attached, and the survey data received also in the attachments to this report. Mr. Mayor, the agenda items summarise the response as well as the meeting minutes in the report attached. After considering the feedback, officers proposed 4 actions. The first is that the physical visitor information centre remains open, but also work to expand its services. The second is engagement is enhanced with the assistance of the creation of a Visitor Economy Advisory Panel, a VEEP in short. That the regional tourism strategy is refocused by updating the Southern Highlands Strategy 2030. And then finally, number 4, that a business plan is created for Destination Southern Highlands. Allow me to say a few words around the Visitor Economy Advisory Panel. The intention of the panel is to facilitate and structure, I guess, engagement and the flow of advice between council and local tourism providers. Some stakeholders supported a board-style panel with financial decision and operating powers. In the survey, it came back 85% of survey respondents supported the creation of a VEEP or a body such as that, and 25% supported what was called a skills-type board. 45% of respondents supported an advisory panel that consists of industry subsector representatives. Finally, the consultation, as documented in the attachments, overwhelmingly showed that the industry preferred successful on-the-ground providers that service the industry and see the strengths and weaknesses of the industry on a daily basis. Officers accepted this view, and this is reflected in the item. Mr. Mayor, staff are looking forward to engaging with stakeholders and commencing the various work streams identified should it be carried. A special acknowledgement of the efforts of the participants, DSSS and others that helped to create the report and responded to the report. It's felt that with an advisory structure, an updated tourism strategy and a business plan on how to deliver that strategy, Council can deliver an even higher level of service in future. Thank you.
I've got a few questions with this one. There are only 20 responses.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. On the survey, it was 1,143 under correction that we sent out. 500, just more than 500 people clicked on the link. There's details in the report about how many actually opened the link, and we received 20 responses in the attachment. We detailed the 20. Some of them are short form; they just said yes or no. Some of them typed it in long form, some of the ideas, yes.
But this was such an issue when I first arrived, the visitor economy generally, that I just find it amazing. There's only 20 responses out of the 1,143, and the statistical basis for that is not fabulous. The question of volunteering, and I'm not suggesting in any way that that the council reduces its funding for the Mittagong Welcome Centre, but is the question of volunteering being considered?
Mr. Mayor, as part of the recommendations of the report, no, we did not. The report did not make specific recommendations with regards to volunteering. We were looking, I guess, at the higher strategic sorts of responses to the recommendations. On an operational level, of course, volunteering is not just central to our community, but as an example, even today at Tulip Time, there's a number of volunteers assisting there. So from a visitor centre as well as a destination, Southern Highlands and the events team, volunteering is something that we do most days of the week.
Well, you know, there's no question something like Tulip Time just wouldn't happen without volunteers, and they're valuable. And you know, we've tried to refocus the council's energy in assisting volunteers, but I just do think there's an opportunity for volunteers in the centre, and I know other councils do that. I agree with you about, these are my words, not yours, the council not abdicating its responsibility in relation to the visitor economy. But I do have a concern with what you're suggesting for the visitor, what do we call it? The visitor economy advisory panel. If you have councillors on that panel, they have a conflict if a matter comes to council, so they can't vote.
That is fair comment. The intent behind the VP is to shorten the distance, I guess, between the people out there cleaning the rooms and booking the rooms and providing visitor economy services, and those in council offices as well as councillors in future, for that advice to flow, so that we have a better appreciation of what the market looks like out there, and that the market gets a better appreciation of perhaps the constraints that we have. It is one of those things that when we structured the terms of reference that is attached, it's the last line. We included that as the last line because it's easy to delete. We did want to and amend. We did want to propose though that we create a forum where everyone, council, well, local government, industry, and experts can come together and discuss issues, not necessarily make decisions or not to make decisions, but that everyone gets an appreciation of what the world looks like.
Mm. But my argument would be that, you know, staff and councillors don't have a mortgage on knowledge when it comes to the visitor economy, and we've got to use as best we can those with the knowledge, and you can't expect them to turn up if you don't give them some teeth in outcome. And I think that's been pretty clearly shown in the consultations I've had and the consultation I went to that the staff had with them. There was differing opinions, and look, I appreciate that there is some ownership, if I could put it that way, on the part of some of the sectors, but I do think that they're a wealth of knowledge, and so look, I'm actually going to defer this to get another report or get further report. I don't think council officers should be on the panel either. They should service the panel and then take whatever recommendations there are from that panel to council. But I do think that the panel should be given some autonomy in working with the council staff. I'm not saying directing the council staff, because no one can do that other than the general manager, but I just do think that there needs to be some mechanism. So, to be quite frank, I have discussed this with the general manager and come up with a recommendation, which I hope takes us forward, and because this is the visitor economy to this community is huge, and we've got to make sure that we. You want to say something, did you? Yeah. That we've got to make sure that we do the right thing and we're on the right track. It's taken this long already. Let's take a few more weeks and look at some other options. So I would move that the Destination Sydney Surrounds Visitor Servicing Report be deferred, and A1, membership of the Visitor Economy Advisory Panel be limited to representatives or industry what is it? I can't read my own writing. Subsectors of the Wingecarribee Shire area. And 2, the General Manager provide options within the parameters of the governing body's statutory responsibilities for the Visitor Economy Advisory Panel to have direct decision-making opportunities. Now, where I'm saying within the parameters of the governing body's statutory responsibilities, what I'm saying is the council not abdicating its space, because I think that's what got the council into trouble to start with. There was a void, and hence we got other groups started, and you know, the visitor economy was they suffered as a result of it. Now, we're trying to pull all this back together, and I think just for the sake of 3 weeks. So I would move as on the screen. And declare that carried. Thank you. Draft Customer Experience Charter, General Manager.
Thank you, Mr. May. Mr. Harb, the Chief Information Officer, will introduce this item. I was just giving you time to get to the chair. Okay.
Thank you, General Manager. Mr. Administrator, the purpose of this report is to formally present and seek Council's endorsement of the draft Customer Experience Standards and Charter for it to be placed on exhibition. By endorsing the draft Customer Experience Standards and Charter, Council establishes clear levels of service and quality of service delivery. Council is committed to providing consistently positive customer experience to our valued community members and aligning our processes with the highest standards of customer service excellence. This charter serves as a foundational framework, allowing us to strive for continuous improvement. It's important to note that the term experience in customer experience refers to the entire journey a customer undergoes, from their initial interaction with the council to their last. In developing these standards in the charter, we look to other councils, benchmarking their standards and charter, and work closely with our internal management team to ensure alignment. Enhanced internal reporting mechanisms now enable us to track and report on customer requests more effectively. In addition, we will continue to gather feedback through surveys and similar initiatives. Furthermore, our participation in annual activities with the National Local Government Customer Service Network involving national benchmarking reinforces our commitment to excellence in customer service and experience. Thank you.
Look, I totally agree with this. It's, there needs to be guidelines and, in effect, KPIs for what happens internally. I do have a concern about answering our telephone calls by the customer service contact centre 80% of the time within 3 minutes. But that's only part one of the equation. You then go to part two, is where you're directed to, or is it the intent that the customer service contact people have much more knowledge about how the council operates?
Correct, Mr. Bates. So our intent is, we've obviously built a knowledge-based system, and from there, obviously that's an evolving system where you input information, and it's the intent that the customer experience staff well equipped with the information on first point of call, that they can resolve the request right there and then without having to escalate the call internally.
And that's what's happening in councils, particularly in the metropolitan area at the moment. But it didn't happen here. What I get told was, and there's been improvements, but what I'm told is, you get the phone answered, then you'd go into a black hole half the time. So that's not happening these days. What percentage of calls then would be dealt with at the customer service contact centre without referral to another person?
At the moment, we're sitting at about 65%.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, so we're improving.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Okay, now, the consequences for the council, because a lot of people will say this is just words.
Of course.
How do you cascade? The only person the council deals with, and we've just dealt with your performance review, is the general manager. How does the general manager, directors and managers cascade this downwards to ensure accountabilities? Does your system allow that?
The system does allow that, especially with our CRM reporting. So obviously we've got the data now that tells us how many customer requests we have, what the breaches in our service levels are. So that then gets attended to at management meetings and executive meetings, and then that's how the cascading happens. So obviously everyone's accountable, management's accountable now, and from there they're able to deliver that down to their staff as well.
Well done.
Thank you.
Okay, in relation to Item 9.4, Draft Customer Service Experience Charter. I would move the recommendation as outlined on... Oh, actually, no, I want to make a slight change. I apologise. I want a report to come back to council on this, rather than just, if there's no submissions, the matter being adopted, I would still like to see it come back to the council. This is an important matter in how the council communicates with the community it represents. So I would move 1 and 2 as outlined on page 47, and number 3 take out and should submissions be received, bring A, and replace that with 4. So, yes, that's on the screen. So it's 1, 2 and 3, and I declare that carried. General Manager, Draft Resource and Waste Strategy for Public Exhibition.
Thank you, Mr. Mays. So Mr. McAllister, Manager Waste and Resource Management, will speak to this item. Thank you.
Thank you, General Manager. Mr. May, the purpose of this report is to present to Council the Waste and Resource Recovery Strategy and seek endorsement for the strategy to be placed on public exhibition for a period of 28 days. The Wingecarribee Shire community generates over 35,000 tonnes of waste annually, with a population of 52,000 spread across numerous population centres and communities across the Shire. A key focus in the development of the strategy has been in engagement of the community through a series of surveys conducted over the past 12 to 18 months and community workshops. The focus of this engagement was around capturing the community and resident, waste needs and expectations, and including them into the strategy with a focus on waste minimisation and resource recovery. The Resource and Waste Management Strategy sets a pathway to support environmental and economic sustainability for the community. In its development, Council has engaged with the community. We have considered the policy and strategic settings, and we've also reviewed current operations, including things like services and facilities, in the development of the strategy and the action guide. The strategy is a combination of ambition, practicality, improved service offering, but also feasibility over the long term, as the strategy, aims to deliver against 3 strategic directions, which are supported by 18 objectives and 78 key actions over the term of the strategy.
Got a couple of questions on this one. How does the strategy apply to the 2,000 properties that we don't service?
Okay. It caters for them in regards to the provision of services. So there are generic actions or accountabilities around improving service and service levels, improving access to recycling, improving access to a range of waste that needs to be provided. It doesn't go into the specifics for it. There will be a separate paper coming to Council in the coming month or months that addresses that specific issue for you.
I can't overemphasise my determination to provide garbage services to all in the Shire where practical. And I know you're looking at innovative ways for villages or localities, but I just can't overemphasise that, because if the council is going to be fair dinkum in its 2041 obligations, we've got to make sure we capture that other 10%. And in land mass, that other 10% would be greater than the land mass of the 90%, if you know what I'm saying. So I just think that's very, very important, and this is an opportunity to again remind everyone that, you know, everybody should have, where practical, should have a garbage service with everything that's offered to it at the same price. Now, whether that's practical, I don't know. But I think, you know, under the current arrangements, garbage trucks drive past properties that could easily have a service. And quite frankly, it's not good enough. Now, it's not your fault. You're trying to fix it. But I just want to reiterate a determination to, where practical, that everybody should be treated the same. We're one shire. Okay, in relation to item 9.4, I would move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 54 of the business paper 1 and 2 and declare that carried. Reuse shop at the Resource Recovery Centre.
Thank you, Mr. May. Back to Mr. McAllister. Thank you.
Thank you, General Manager. Mr. May, the purpose of this report is to brief Council on the current lease status of the Reuse or Reviver Centre and recommend the operational model for the centre moving forward. Through the operations of the Reuse Centre, Council offers to the community an opportunity for waste product to be removed from the waste stream and upcycled or recycled and on-sold to the community, extending its life in the environment. Reducing and particularly reducing waste that is destined to landfill. These items can include furniture, general household items, tools, building products, clothing, through to knickknacks. The current provider, Resource Recovery Australia, has had a lease over the operations for the past 10 years, with that lease due to expire in March 2024. In reviewing the models, Council has reviewed a number of different models, including the continuation of an outsource model, a fee-for-service model, a profit share model, and an insourcing model. Each of the models come with advantages and disadvantages as outlined in the report, and it is recommended that Council adopt an in-source model, as this will provide Council with the greatest opportunity to adopt a circular economy approach. So for me, that means enabling compliance to the 2019 Waste Action Plan, also ensuring harmonisation and compliance with the New South Wales Resource Recovery Framework. It maximises the potential diversion from landfill and places the ownership and responsibility directly on us to achieve that. Allows engagement with the broader community in reuse and community initiatives to support the centre, and also maximises the potential profit from the centre. It is also recommended that Resource Recovery Australia be acknowledged for their efforts and support in the reuse of material and diversion from landfill, given their operation of the centre over the past 10 years.
Does the current operator know that this report was coming to Council tonight?
Yes, they were informed on Monday morning that the report was going up and the intent and nature of the report.
Thank you very much. In relation to item 9.6, the reuse shop at the operational model, I'd move the officer's recommendation 1 and 2 as outlined on page 64 of the business paper and declare it carried. General Manager, 9.7, bulky waste collection.
Thank you, Mr. May. I think this is your last report, Mr. McAllister.
Thank you, General Manager. Mr. May, the purpose of this report is to present to Council an update on the bulky waste service provided to residents in 2023 between January and April, and outline the timing for confirmation on the bulky waste service model moving forward. Council have now undertaken 2 scheduled curbside bulky waste collections for residents of the Shire, with the 2013 program experiencing the following trends. The participation rate dropped from 85% to 71%. Waste to landfill in volume dropped by 22%. The steel collected and recycled increased by 15%. Mattresses decreased from 1,881 to 1,274. And the total increase to deliver the service increased by 13%. A number of improvements that were implemented in the 2023 program had mixed result. With the increasing to 10 zone and shorter collection periods, although it worked well initially, due to some resource shortages, waste volumes experienced, and leaving one of the larger areas to last, unfortunately, it did result in extended project delivery delays or collection delays to some of our Northern Shire residents. Reporting for the 2023 was greatly improved, particularly with the tracking of non-collection and non-compliant items or illegal dumping, with 359 complaints recorded in 2023 over just 21 in 2022. Customer-related inquiries received through our contractors' call centre also increased by over 1,000 during that period. The collection of waste in this curbside model had a negative impact of 2.8% on our diversion from waste landfill percentage. In line with the adopted resolution and the ongoing provision of a bulky waste collection service, Council has engaged the services of a professional consultant, David McKinley from Abraxia, to provide a detailed report on the adoption of bulky waste service models across local government, the risks and benefits of the models, and recommend a model of best practice. This paper, in conjunction with the bulky waste reports and the bulky waste surveys, will be the formation of a further detailed report provided to Council to ensure that the delivery of the bulky waste service is delivers the best value to the community.
Are you suggesting that there could be a major change in 24, or Mr McKinley has been appointed to assist with the longer term contract, or both?
Both. So Mr McKinley's engaged to look at the different models. So there are three predominant models that he's looking at, one being the scheduled service, similar to we've experienced the last 2 years, but there are other models around an on-call service where people can actually book and have the waste collected from the curbside through to resident drop-off. Each model has different price points and advantages, and some of the disadvantages are that different models may segment or not offer equal and fair access to all members of the community. So this analysis is to, I guess, identify the best model that we can deliver that covers, I guess, the delivery of the service to the resident, provides fair and equal access for all residents to participate in it, but also gives them the best value for, I guess, the dollar to deliver it and maximise our recovery.
Does the brief require that the consultant give consideration to resident convenience?
It does, and that's about the fair and equal access to all. So certain models like a resident drop-off is not conducive to residents that don't have a trailer or a truck to transport, or they may have a medical or other disability that may prevent them from actually loading and transporting it.
Is that consultant also assisting with the development of the bigger contract, or just this specific issue?
Just the specific bulky waste element.
On page 72, where you look at collection costs comparisons, you've got loss of RRC revenue, last year not considered, this year $140,800. How did you get that figure?
Okay, so that figure is based upon the volume of waste that effectively has bypassed the Resource Recovery Centre and gone directly to a landfill. We have paid for that to be landfilled and disposed.
Sorry, can you just go back?
Sorry? Okay.
Start again. Sorry, I just missed that.
In simple terms, if we didn't have a bulky waste collection, the volume of waste that was collected would have to come over our weighbridge through the Resource Recovery Centre, and residents would actually pay. So it's put there as, an element of lost revenue that would normally have come into, I guess, the council operating budget, and then we would have disposed of that waste appropriately.
So it, again, doesn't address ratepayer convenience and environmental issues such as travelling to and from their properties and the impact, particularly on Argyle Street, of that happening on weekends, going out to the Resource Recovery Centre.
No, it doesn't.
You won't be able to answer this one. Maybe the General Manager can, I don't know. Bob Finch, the consultant, I got to do a report on this in the early days about whether this was practical and the cost of it, and what effect it would have on the council's reserves. And he said he didn't believe it would have, that the reserves could afford it, I think was the finding at the end of the day. You seem concerned about the cost of what's this costing. I'm coming from convenience to ratepayers, and that's not being disrespectful, but I understand your role, you understand mine. General Manager, the effect of what we're doing In other words, the cost of 945,000, and you can't take the 140,000 into consideration, in my view. I would hope that you're not doing internal figures and giving resource recovery 140,000, but that's a matter that I'll keep my eye on, because I don't think it's a fair thing to do.
Mr. May, the intent was to give full visibility of the entire project costs and or potential loss of revenue. That's the
Yeah, okay.
intent.
Well, that's the cost, but again, it doesn't deal with the environmental considerations of dump rubbish. And the reason why I reckon there's a reduction this year to last year is the council hadn't done it for years. And it was a bit of a nightmare last year, and a bit of a nightmare again this year. But I think it's a greatly used and appreciated service on the part of residents. But General Manager, is Finch right or wrong on the impact on reserves for domestic waste service?
Thank you, Mr. May. Just a comment before I answer that question. In terms of convenience, we recognise the value and the convenience. From the operational management side, it's looking at the financial impacts and as a whole. In terms of what Mr. Finch's report showed, he indicated that it would not have a negative impact on the reserve, in the sense that we would still continue to build the reserve, albeit not at the same rate, but we would build it. What I would say is we have two major tenders that are coming up. One is for processing of waste, the other is for collection of waste. And given the movement in waste and resource management, we need a bit of buffer, and that's part of the intent of that reserve, is to provide that buffer so that if there needs to be a smoothing of any increased costs, we can accommodate that within the reserve. The other purpose that reserve fulfills is, as the manager has mentioned, we've just completed the draft waste strategy that will be going out on exhibition. That waste strategy, pending the adoption of council, may well have or may well generate a need for infrastructure at the Resource Recovery Centre to assist in implementing some of those strategies. Of course, we will apply for grants through EPA and other agencies, but there may well need to be an investment by council into some of that infrastructure. Therefore, that reserve will also come into play. But in short, yes, Mr. Finch was right, and the reserve is also there, though, to accommodate some of the changes we know are coming on the horizon.
So, in effect, the reserve has been maintained, and that's what he said he thought would happen. That's good news. Okay. I think it's a great service, and I think, the contractor and your team should be thanked. I know there's bit of work and inconvenience in it, but I can tell you it's appreciated by residents. In relation to item 9.7, I'd move the officer's recommendation 1 and 2 on page 70 of the business paper and declare that carried. The revolving energy fund, General Manager.
Thank you, Mr. May. Mr. Arthur, the Manager of Environment and Sustainability, will introduce this item. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. May, this report provides an update on the achievements of Council's Revolving Energy Fund for the 2022-2023 financial year. Council established the Revolving Energy Fund in 2012 as a mechanism to generate ongoing funding for projects that reduce Council's billed energy consumption. The Revolving Energy Fund funds solar and energy efficiency projects across on Council buildings. Savings from Revolving Energy Fund projects are reinvested back into the fund until the initial project costs are fully repaid. As the Revolving Energy Fund is replenished, it is then used to fund future energy projects across Council. Council has implemented 11 energy projects through the Revolving Energy Fund. To date, the Revolving Energy Fund has resulted in over 2,000 megawatt hours of solar generated and used on site, saving nearly $400,000 on electricity bills and reducing our greenhouse gas emissions by over 1,800 tonnes of carbon dioxide. Table 1 in the report presents an overview of the energy and resulting financial savings achieved for the 2022-23 financial year. The value of financial savings attributed to the Revolving Energy Fund projects for the 2022-2023 financial year is $31,405.94, and approval is sought to transfer this total into the Revolving Energy Fund, enabling further energy management projects to be implemented in coming years.
Look, I would move in relation to item 9.8 on page 78, the officer's recommendation 1 and 2, and declare it carried. Thank you. Next item is 9.9, 25 Sherlaw. How do you pronounce that? Sherlaw Road, Robinson, General Manager.
Thank you, Mr. May. Back to Mr. Kloppers. Thank you.
I hope I'll get the pronunciation right. Sherlaw. Thank you, General Manager. Mr. May, this report relates to the acquisition of land for road purposes to resolve encroachment of the formed Sherlaw Road in Robertson upon privately owned land. Investigations have established that the cost of formation of the road within the registered road reserve would be significantly higher than the depreciated value of the existing road, and the acquisition has previously been reported to Council, and this report now today seeks the necessary resolution to enable Council to finalise negotiations with the owner of 24 Sherlaw Road, Robertson, for acquisition of the land required to rectify the road encroachment on the property. Happy to take questions.
Thank you. Thank you. In relation to item 9.9, part 25 Sherlaw Road, Robinson, I'd move the officer's recommendation on page 82, 1, 2, 3 and 4, and declare that carried. A bit easier this one, Old South Road, 9.10.
Thank you, Mr. Kloppers again.
Thank you, General Manager. Mr. May, this report relates to the acquisition of an easement for water main at Old South Road in Bowral. Council has identified through Council's Water Master Plan that the existing water supply to Redford Park East Estate is insufficient, unfortunately, with recent developments in that area putting additional strain on the supply. To rectify the issue, Council is looking to install a new service to enable augmentation of the existing system and rerouting of the Redford Park East Estate supply to the East Bowral Reservoir. As part of all those works, it's been identified that an easement for the water main is required, and this report seeks the necessary resolution to enable Council to commence negotiations with the affected property owner.
Thank you. In relation to 9.10, 1325 Old South Road, I'd move the officer's recommendation on page 90 of the business paper, 1, 2, 3 and 4, and declare that carried. 9.11, part 801 and end 848 Range Road, Glen Quarry. General Manager.
Thank you, Mr. May, and yes, Mr. Kloppers. Thank you.
Thank you, General Manager. Mr. May, this report relates to the acquisition of land for road purposes affecting 2 properties at Range Road, Glen Quarry. Council is undertaking road upgrade works to Range Road between George Emery Lane and Tourist Road in the Glen Quarry area. As part of those works, the road reserve requires slight widening in certain locations. Council officers have been in contact with all the affected landowners to discuss the upgrade and the acquisition process and what might be happening next. A report was presented to Council on 21st of June 2023 for acquisition of land associated with this road upgrade. Since the report, further areas of land acquired for acquisition have been identified by that department. Accordingly, this report seeks the additional necessary resolution to enable Council to commence negotiations again with the affected property owners about these slithers. Thank you.
Thank you. In relation to item 9.11, part 801, 848 Range Road, Glen Quarry, I'd move the officer's recommendation as outlined on pages 96 and 97 of the business paper, 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5, and declare that carried. General Manager, 9.12, Marila Road, Barrel.
That'll do. Thank you, Mr. Cloppers. Last report. Thank you.
Thank you, General Manager. Mr. May, the purpose of this report is to seek council resolution to proceed with the closure of Marila Road in Barrel. The subject road has an area of approximately 1,300 square metres. Following council's resolution, the proposed closure was placed on public exhibition for a period of about just in excess of 4 weeks. During consultation, submissions were received as outlined in the report. Adjoining landowners have raised concerns regarding access to their proposed adjoining developments. Legal advice has confirmed that Marila Road is not reasonably necessary for public use. Whilst the road reserve proposed for closure connects to Mossville Road, it's not required as a means for access to any other public road network, and is not needed to provide access to any of those properties. They all have independent additional main access points. All properties adjoining that road, as I noticed, had alternative access. Transport for New South Wales have been consulted and have provided no objection to the closure. Mr. Mayor, after considering the feedback and the legal nature of some of the feedback we received, Council prepared a commentary attached only after considering additional legal advice we sought, and that's outlined in the report. As submissions were received during the period for public exhibition, the proposed closure is now reported back to Council for a decision on the matter.
Look, I read all those submissions and I agree with the officer's recommendation. In relation to item 9.12, Marila Road, Barrel, I'd move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 104 of the business paper, 1, 2, 3 and 4, and declare that carried. General Manager of the Councillor Portal demonstration.
Thank you, Mr. May. Over the next 12 months, we'll be preparing for the return of the elected council, with the election scheduled in September 2024. As part of this, we're working on preparing information and supporting systems and processes to assist the incoming councillors. As part of this, our Chief Information Officer, CIO, and his team and the broader team have been working on preparing a councillor portal, and we'd like to provide a demonstration to you this afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Harp.
Thank you, General Manager. Mr. Administrator, the purpose of this report is to introduce the Councillor Intranet Portal as a tool for Council while outlining the anticipated advantages it offers. These advantages include consolidating information, promoting collaboration among councillors, ensuring a secure platform, and facilitating transparent information distribution. The report intends to highlight the substantial positive The report intends to highlight the substantial positive influence the Councillor Intranet will provide on Council operations, reaffirming Council's focus on efficient governance. In conjunction with this report, we have prepared a presentation. In this presentation, I will talk to the existing and future processes and issues with a quick video on the portal and some of the features. Council's current processes are a challenge. In this slide, we will uncover the inefficiencies and financial burdens of our existing methods. It is evident that there are sustainability concerns with our current processes involving printing and delivering paper-based business papers and forms to councillors. Unfortunately, this approach is neither financially nor environmentally sustainable. We do expose Council to potential data and security vulnerability risks and issues with the potential loss of data and information sharing breaches. There are also existing financial impacts with the existing process. Financially, this translates to printing costs of approximately $3,500 per year and resourcing costs exceeding $9,000 per year, which includes stationery and delivery expenses. These expenses only relate to ordinary council meetings. The current process creates councillor inefficiencies. Councillors struggle to efficiently manage business papers and minutes, and they lack the ability to digitally mark up documents. We lack a centralised resource centre, making it challenging to maintain a single source of truth for information updates for our elected officials. There is also integration challenges. Our processes are not integrated with our current systems, hindering improvement and inefficiencies. Paper-based forms submitted by councillors increase security risks and make our paper-based procedures prone to errors. With existing trends on being digital, the existing processes are falling behind in digital adoption compared to modern standards. These challenges highlight the need for a transition to a more efficient and sustainable council process, emphasising digital solutions and improved information management practices. Our council's future solution for councillors and system access is a digital-centric approach, addressing the shortcomings of our current processes. On this slide, I will delve into the key points of the transformative journey. With the topic of financial and environmental sustainability, the Tomorrow process emphasises financial and environmental sustainability. Through the portal, we will implement electronic business papers, leading to paperless councils and reduce administrative workloads. In addressing the issue with paper-based forms, we will ingest all paper-based forms and we will digitise them with streamlined workflows and robust record keeping. In addressing the cybersecurity and data loss protection issues, the portal provides built-in data loss protection for confidential papers, ensuring secure access and preventing unauthorised distribution. In comparison to the financials, the estimated cost with the portal is approximately $8 per user per month, and the implementation cost of the portal is $27,000. Focusing on the portal functionality and purpose, the portal will offer a range of features including, and these are not limited to, the events calendar, centralising key contacts for both internal and external stakeholders, downloadable and accessible response templates for community requests, interconnectivity with council's resources, the promotion of collaboration between councillors and council officers in a transparent manner, mobile accessibility for anytime, anywhere access to policies, procedures and training materials to enhance councillor skills and inform decision making. Real-time updates and notifications also to keep councillors consistently informed. This forward-thinking digital solution promises to enhance and improve our processes, enhancing efficiency, transparency and accessibility for all involved. This next slide here presents the project timeline. Today we're in the implementation and configuration phase, and we are hoping to go live in December 2023. So this is the quick video on the portal itself.
Welcome to the new council portal. This centralised resource will allow you to find information at your fingertips. It'll be where you find business papers through docs on tap. Business papers, mini agendas and minutes are stored in here. Simply access your meeting in the menu on the left. Then find the section of that meeting that you'd like to read. You can leave comments or notes on the document by clicking the Notes button, and colour code the notes that you leave. This allows you to go back and filter through your notes on the type or the colour. View your comments left in red. Docs on Tap also allows you to use a highlighter function to highlight sections of text. You can also use the portal to create a customer request. This is the same system that the community can access and uses today. Things like potholes, graffiti, anything that the council is responsible for. Another function available in the portal is the ability to leave a question on a notice. Simply click on that link and fill out the form that appears. These are just some of the functions available on the Councillor portal.
Thank you.
A couple of questions. For someone like me, a dinosaur who likes paper, will councillors who are elected who want a hard copy get a hard copy, or they've got to use this?
Thanks. Mr. Mayor, I think as part of the induction process, we'll be providing a lot of training. If councillors wish to print off their business paper, we can certainly provide them with a printer, and I believe that there's a facilities policy that also covers cost resourcing, providing support to councillors, so that's a choice. But obviously with any system, we will provide a comprehensive onboarding and training program to support them. And it's really no different to sending an email in a sense. So if you can send an email, I believe that the portal is just as easy to use. Thank you, Mr. May.
Thank you. Questions on notice, are they for incorporation in business papers or?
Thank you, Mr. May. Yes, that's correct. So last business paper, you would have seen there were responses to questions raised, and that'll be something going forward so that the questions that are raised with notice are recorded and reported back to the council.
Interesting. The final one is the customer requests. If a councillor puts a customer request in, it just still goes in accordance with the service standards we are talking about.
That's correct, Mr. Administrator.
So if
Yes, I know that, well, I can tell you the Central Coast, they are changing their systems at the moment, because if a resident went to a councillor, it was dealt with expeditiously. That's not the role of a councillor.
If I could, Mr. May, so on the paper, the business paper today, we have the customer service charter and the service levels. So all of the work we're doing starts to line up and support good governance and transparency. So what you saw in that demonstration is on the portal, when you click a request, it automatically goes into the CRM, the Customer Request Management System, and it's in the system rather than going, to an email, to a person, then re-entering. It's traceable, it's auditable, and it also assists us in making sure that we meet our service levels.
I have a suspicion, or I think, if I recall correctly, a councillor has an obligation to maintain records under the Records Act.
You might need to take that on notice, Mr. May, in terms of individual responsibilities, but certainly if they're using a councillor email that is in our system, the portal also provides that security.
I just, from my old days, I've got a sneaky suspicion that the Act was changed, and it might have been through ICAC recommendations, but I think councils have to maintain official records. So this would certainly go along if a councillor used this all the time. I'm not looking forward to December this year, though, because you said it's going to be live from then.
Mr. Administrator will offer the training.
Okay, thanks very much for that. I think it was very informative. Will that presentation go up onto the web?
To Mr. May, we can include that with the minutes today as something documented, as a what do you call it? Tabled document.
Yeah, okay, thanks very much. Okay, in relation to item 9.13, the councillor portal, I'd move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 114 of the business paper and declare that carried. Next item, Mittagong Playhouse, General Manager.
Thank you, Mr. May. The Director Committee is in place. Mr. Davis will introduce this item. Thank you.
Thank you, General Manager. Mr. May, at the ordinary meeting of the 16th of August, Council resolved that a further report be provided in relation to the Mittagong Playhouse, addressing questions on the cost of the project, the planning approvals pathway, and the heritage significance of the site. As detailed in the report, there is a difference between the total project cost and capital investment value, which is defined for the purposes of determining, valuing a development application. A review of the quantity surveyor's report and their calculation of capital investment value has been undertaken. The costs excluded from the capital investment value calculation by the registered quantity surveyor at the time appear to be generally correct. It is noted that, according to the Department of Planning and Environment, once a development application is determined by the consent authority to be a specific type of development based on the calculation of CIV, so in other words, once the consent authority is satisfied, it remains that class of development regardless of any subsequent variations to CIV or other relevant factors. The independent assessment planner at the time, so this was the application was actually assessed by an independent assessment planner at the time. They were satisfied with the quantity surveyor's capital investment value calculation. They were satisfied the application on that basis. The application was not regional development, and that it could be determined by the local planning panel. On the matter of so that was in answer, essentially that was based on what was provided. That was the correct planning pathway that was taken. The other matter that was raised was the question of the heritage significance of the site, and as detailed in the report, there are essentially three layers of heritage significance on the site, buildings that were added to that site. While some may take the view that the original was more substantial, they are actually all significant, and they actually tell the story of the site, the history and the evolution and development of both that local government area at the time and also the community in and around Mittagong. So they are all three layers have significance in that regard. None of them are considered intrusive. So sometimes later additions are intrusive. They're actually all significant in that case.
So then you're generally satisfied that the calculation of capital investment value is in accordance with the circular issued by the Department of Planning back in 2021?
Mr. Mayor, as I said, yes, based on the CIV report that was provided by the registered surveyor at that time and what they've included and excluded, that appears to be correct, and I'm satisfied.
Thank you very much. Look, just in relation to Mittagong Playhouse, I'm pleased to advise that we've, General Manager myself and the Council Officer, who's not here, have met with both the Honourable Stephen Jones and Judy Hannon now down at the site, and I think we have their support into what we're trying to achieve. And I think we can be quietly confident that we'll achieve something. But in addition, we've reactivated negotiations with the Playhouse Theatre Group about their storage area at Welby, and hopefully we'll be able to say more about that in coming meetings. So, as I promised, Mittagong Playhouse hasn't been forgotten. We're moving forward, and we hope to get an outcome that is as fantastic as the Bower Memorial Hall. So in relation to item 9.14, Mittagong Playhouse, I'd move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 190 of the business paper and declare that carried. Next item is open access to information in relation to development applications. General Manager.
Thank you, Mr. May. Mr. Davis, back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, General Manager. Mr. May, Council considered a report on the 19th of July in relation to development application information being made openly available on Council's website via its development application tracker or e-tracker. Council noted at that time that noted the report and resolved that the matter be deferred and that a further report come back to Council to allow direct input from the Administrator, and that the Administrator be authorised in consultation with the General Manager to obtain third-party assistance in accordance with the Council's procurement policies. The purpose of this report today, Mr. Administrator, is to report, is to detail the types of information relating to development applications which could be made openly available for public viewing via the development application tracker on Council's website. The report provides an indication of the level of risk, the proposed mitigation measures, importantly, and the resource implications. A further review since July has been undertaken of Council's advice, of our legislative obligations, of the ability of our systems and processes to accommodate more open access to information on the DA tracker while appropriately managing and mitigating risks. And we've also undertaken a wider survey of DA trackers for 10 councils throughout the state to ascertain what other councils do make openly available and what might be considered best practice. Councils, I note that councils make various information, including submissions and floor plans, openly available to viewing on their websites to varying degrees. Importantly, I note that the GIPA Act and GIPA regulation require clearly that councils to publish the information they hold about DAs on their websites. They require mandatory proactive release of certain government information that is deemed to be open access information unless there is an overriding public interest against disclosure of the information in the particular circumstances. The advice that we obtained considered the potential extent of information being contemplated for disclosure and publication on our website against the risk areas, or against balancing that against defamation, copyright, privacy and public interest considerations. The advice recommended practical measures, and we've also considered practical measures to ameliorate or virtually eliminate potential risk. With the measures in place, the legal advice and risk analysis found that most of the information to be low risk to make available on our website or on our development application tracker. I would say, particularly in relation to the disclosure of plans, reports and statements of environmental effects, in relation to matters such as copyright, that it is, about 50% of councils make those available, and that's very much a council policy decision. But I would note that making these documents available for viewing, and particularly internal floor plans, facilitates, and this is reflected in state guidelines, community participation and accountability. Mr. Administrator, the report recommends that in addition to the standard DA lodgement documentation, which are the neighbour notification records, website notice, external authority consultation documents, local planning panel decisions and assessment determination, that also the following low risk information be made openly available on Council's development application tracker in relation to DAs, except in particular circumstances where there has been a valid overriding public interest reason against disclosure of specific details. So they are internal floor plans, public submissions, formal correspondence and requests for additional information, applicant and owner correspondence received, additional supporting documentation including reports and amended plans, and final internal referral advice and specialist consultant advice. Recommendation 2 is that information be released through social and traditional media to communicate the new policy on open information and development application documentation, as well as the upcoming system changes to landowners, future applicants, builders and designers. Recommendation 3 is that Council's development application checklists and guidance information on the website be updated to reflect the new policy on open information and development application documentation, including clarifying that for residential development, the requirements for floor plan details are only what's necessary to assess the application, being room layout, partitioning and windows and doors, existing and new proposed areas and any demolition works, room dimensions and floor areas, proposed broad use of each room being either living area, bedroom or non-habitable. And the 4th recommendation is that a further report be presented to Council to review the notification of development proposals policy 2018 to be consistent with this resolution, and that the community participation within the adopted community engagement strategy 2023.
Hallelujah.
That was a lot.
This has been a long process, but I think we're just about there. I'm right, aren't I, that previously or today, if you're an applicant and you want to see what an objector's saying, you've got to do a GIPA?
You would need to request that information, yes, that's right.
It's clearly ridiculous. And look, there's been someone corresponding with me about access to plans and copyright. Why make plans available if the next door neighbour can't see what is proposed in certain areas of the house, especially if it's a second story, overlooking and all this type of thing? I'm hoping that this new policy will take us back to residents talking to each other over the back fence a lot more before they put applications in. That's what needs to happen. But the council also needs to have some very, very clear guidelines for what is and isn't acceptable, and that's all being worked on in concurrence with this. You might be able to answer this one, but how long before phone calls and replies and counter requests and replies can be put onto the site? The CFO.
Mr. Mayor.
CIO, thank you.
Mr. Administrator, I can answer that. We're in the process, obviously, of digitising a lot of our systems, and while we upgrade these systems, we'll be able to turn on a lot more features. We are logging these calls at the moment via CRM, but to make them available on the application tracker, we're probably about this time next year away before we can start looking at it and seeing what features we can start enabling and enabling that feature on the tracker itself.
Put simply, you're saying the linkages, the simple linkages aren't there. It would be quite a journey to move from one section to the other rather than just pushing a button.
Correct. It's not as easy as that. And if you were to do it today, it would require too many steps that would mean the processes and procedures.
I'm not out to make work. I'm out to make it easier for staff and make it easier for residents.
Yes.
So there's that one. Pre-DA meetings, which I see you're not real keen on putting up, can they be GIP'd?
Through you, Mr. Administrator, yes, they can be GIP'd, and we consider those applications on request, but I might, the Manager of Corporate Governance might want to add.
Certainly an application could be put in and would be assessed against the criteria.
And what would be the chances of success?
Well, the GIP Act talks to being in favour of disclosure, so you need to weigh up against the public interest. So it would depend what was in those letters, but I don't think they would contain anything that would be a problem in terms of releasing.
I'm of the view it's in the public interest to release it. I do think a lot of things, I get a lot of complaints about the length of time to uplift information from the portal and do fee calculation sheets for residents. And I'd like an internal service standard prepared by the General Manager to address that. I've told that it's on occasions been months, which is just not good enough. So there's that one. And dilapidation reports and bonds. Is there another report coming to Council about dilapidation reports?
Mr. Administrator, I'd have to take that on notice. It's not that I'm aware of.
Council resolution for dilapidation reports on all public property. I think that needs to come. And also that needs to go on to the DAs online too, so a resident can see what the condition of the footpath was before it all started and what it is now. I think these are all very, very important transparency matters for the council. And the final thing, where are we up to with section 138 and section 68 being dealt with concurrently? It's my understanding that the DA is issued, but the DA is in effect unactionable until the section 68 and section 138 applications are dealt with.
Through you, Mr. May, that's correct. The practice of the council over the past recent years has been to look at the Section 68 application following the issue of the development consent. So this essentially means you're waiting on a second approval. After that, from the 1st of September, all development applications received where they've indicated they also would like a Section 68, which is most dwelling house applications. It's probably about 80 to 90% of our applications, they seek that at the same time. From the 1st of September, all of those applications, they are being assessed and dealt with concurrently.
That makes common sense because it's one council dealing with the matters. So look, I'm really pleased for the cooperation, and it wasn't necessary to get third-party advice. We had some conversations about what was achievable and what we hoped to achieve. So in relation to item 9.15, I would move that one, council pre-development application correspondence be placed on the development application tracker immediately upon receipt of a development application in respect of the subject property. 2, the General Manager fix an internal service standard for the clearance of the submitted applications and the issuing of the fee estimate to the New South Wales Planning Portal. 3, Council note the advice of the Director of Communities in Place that Section 68 and Section 138 matters associated with the development application will be undertaken concurrently with the development application consent. I don't think there's any need to put your 1st of September date in because that's happening now. That's fabulous news. And the rest of it, well, 1 will become 4, 2 will become 5, 3 will become 6, 4 will become 7. And I have great pleasure in declaring that carried. When will it be up and running? It's obviously not going to be retrospective. You can't do that.
Mr. Administrator, some of those will be actioned immediately. So from, say, next week, that practice will commence.
But the clunkiness of the DA's online process will be addressed also. People tell me you've got to push too many buttons.
Just while I wait for Mr. Harb to come back, that's the intent, is to simplify. I probably just need Mr. Harb to talk about timeframes. But we are also refreshing our website, and that should be live end of October, early November. And the aim is to get to where you want to be within 3 clicks. In terms of the online tracker.
Thank you, General Manager. Mr. Administrator, in regards to the development application tracker, we're actually reviewing that now. We're waiting, obviously, to sit down and discuss what the end solution looks like with a go-live date of middle of December.
Fabulous. Thank you very much. Okay. I said we would go into... we'll do a couple more. 9.16, the School Community Service Award donations. General Manager.
Thank you, Mr. May. The Manager, Community Life and Libraries, Ms. Badgett-Julev, will introduce this item.
Thank you, General Manager. Through you, Mr. May. The purpose of this report is to seek Council's approval to implement a streamlined process for the annual School Community Service Awards, which is a donation for local primary and secondary schools in the Wingecarribee Shire. Each year, Council allocates budget for the school's donation, and it's been in place for about 20 years. The current process, however, is that a donation is only provided to state schools. It's a general donation. The school obviously nominate the student, and the donation can be used for different things. Some schools reach out to request the donation, and others we just send what we gave them last year. So this report proposes a more robust and transparent approach to the school donations, offering it to all local primary and secondary schools, not just state, as well as independent, Catholic, etc. So, but rather than a general donation, we're proposing that it will be a gift card to a nominated student, and they'll receive a certificate as well. As part of the process, we'll be requesting also that secondary schools consider nominating that student for the Young Citizen of the Year as well, to ensure that we're getting more young citizens. And the proposed changes are within the budget allocation. So where currently it was secondary schools received $125, and again, that was for general donation, we're proposing $100 to a student. And in terms of our primary schools, it would be $50 instead of $60. So.
No, this is a great idea. It's much more equitable
Yes.
than what was happening. So in relation to item 9.16, School Community Service Award donations, I would move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 151 of the business paper 1 and 2 and declare that carried. It's now 5 o'clock. I would move suspension of standing orders, so orders be suspended. We move into Committee of the Whole to provide the opportunity for members of the public to address Council on item 9.20, Mount Gibraltar unauthorised mountain bike track, review of environmental factors, and declare that carried. So we're now in Committee of the Whole, which is much more informal than Council. I indicated, I think it was the first time Mount Gibraltar was dealt with, that I acknowledged that school students would be at school at 3:30 or on the way home, and we had to get a better way. And I thank the staff for coming up with this idea of going into Committee of the Whole at 5 o'clock, so everybody can be heard, everybody can hear what other people have to say. That's what we're trying to make this a community council, so that everybody is heard. So, General Manager, haven't we got a whole lot of letters, or you do that at council? Okay. Alrighty. Okay, the first person who, and this is in the order of their being received, Travis McPherson. You're an old hand at this, so you'll know what buttons to push.
Good afternoon, everyone. So I don't really like being up here again because it means, most of what I've previously said hasn't been heard. And I know again today that most of what I say will probably fall on deaf ears, but I'm just going to try and re-emphasise what we've all been saying for the past couple of months. So I just want to start off by saying that, us riders, we've been doing everything that's been asked for us, unlike, the other party involved. Like, we've stayed away from riding the closed parts of the trail. We haven't built anything. We've tried to really, get in on this and show that we're committed and we want to work with the council to, sort this out. I'd also like to say that council had given us the impression that these trails will not be destroyed unless another alternative is provided, and we will not be left, out on the street with nothing to do, nowhere to go. And I appreciated that at the time, but as of the recent report, I don't see that happening at the moment. It's very disheartening to hear that. I've said this multiple times already, but these trails have been here for 20 years, and I could be wrong in this, but I'm sure that any significant environmental harm would have been noticed in that time. And if there was any, they would have been discovered by now. And, there's an emotional side to this as well, because these trails have created a real community amongst us boys, and without that, then all the connections that we've made and all the friendships that we've made, they wouldn't exist, and many more connections and friendships that could have been made probably won't as well. And, I'm keeping it kind of brief today, but I'd like to emphasise how disheartening it is for all of us to have put in all this effort over this previous 6 months, and with the belief that we're going to get something out of this, and to come out of it with basically nothing at the moment. And on behalf of all the riders, I would like to emphasise the complete and utter waste of time this past 6 months has been for us. I would like to say that I hope Landcare are happy with having the jib all to themselves for people just trying to enjoy themselves. Can I have this table, please?
Yes, of course. Janine McPherson.
I've got a lot of questions. I'm trying to keep it factual and not emotional. While we acknowledge the efforts of the Council in supporting young people aged 12 to 24, we strongly dissent from the recommendations and decisions made, particularly concerning the riders of the jib and their recreational activities. While the Wingecarribee Shire Council has a commendable intention of aiming to support youth programs and activities, we question the Council's commitment to the youth population, which aims to encourage collaboration, enhance understanding and advocate for increased funding. The Council's action have not aligned with this. We demand answers regarding the absence of financial support for the riders of the jib who fall within the age of 12 to 24. How does this align with the Council's policy of supporting them, and why has the recommendation for further support not been pursued? We question the Council's commitment to supporting our lobbying efforts for increased opportunities. Where is the Council's tangible support for the youth's aspirations and demands for greater opportunities? We seek transparency in understanding how the environmental levy is utilised and how ratepayers are engaged in decisions regarding environmental conservation. What precisely is the allocation of this levy, and why are ratepayers excluded from these important decisions? We demand financial reports from the past 5 years to account for the allocation of the environmental levy. We request an explanation for the Council's continued support of bushcare members who have openly admitted and participated in track tampering endangering youth. We seek clarification on why funds have not been allocated to support youth gravity riding through service providers. We demand an explanation for the statement suggesting that young riders must leave their shire to pursue their recreation. How does this align with Council's youth engagement policy? We question the decision to remove tracks that have served generations of youth, as it directly reduces services rather than increasing them. What interim provisions will be made? We seek answers regarding the absence of youth riders' access to recreational activities, the removal of an inclusive and healthy lifestyle for boys, and the redirection of riders to seek activity outside of the Shire, which contradicts the goal of providing services locally. We demand an explanation for how the removal of beloved activities supports youth involvement and the commitment they have shown. The youth have met performance indicators and followed Council guidelines. We question the Council's refusal to engage with Landcare for an intergenerational activity, which is a departure from its policy. Why is the Council not fostering a partnership that respects the needs of both groups? We seek an exploration for the removal of trails that have supported both riders and local businesses. How does this decision support communities' economic well-being? We demand an explanation for the lack of new data since 2018. We question the infrequent holding of the Wingecarribee Youth Forum. Why is this not held regularly? Given the dramatic demographic changes of the region, we seek an explanation for the outdated data in the 2016 to 26 Youth Strategy Plan. We emphasise the need for specific outcomes in Council's actions and decisions. The community deserves clarity on the expected results of the action plan. We request a scorecard demonstrating Council's performance against all action plan priorities and the actual outcomes delivered for youth in the Wingecarribee Shire. We seek details on the services identified and new services delivered as a result of this advocacy. How has council increased awareness of young people's needs? And what are the tangible results? We question how the council continues to access the needs of young people in Wingecarribee in light of the high-profile youth issue. We emphasise that redirecting youth to satisfy their needs outside the Shire is not a satisfactory answer. How does council plan to address these needs comprehensively? How does council include young people in consultation strategies for planning recreational activities and open spaces? What new facilities have been delivered and how are these decisions made? We question how the need for a gravity downhill mountain bike riding, a clear youth need, will be incorporated into council's recreation planning. What provisions will be made in the interim? How has the current course of action promoted healthy lifestyle choices, especially given the negative impact on youth recreation? We seek clarification on how council has met the community's desire for better local service and facilities given the current situation. We question the allocation of 2,700 kilometres of Shire land for protection, which appears to prohibit its use. How does this align with community values and aspirations for access to natural environments? Equity and fairness. How do council's recommendations align with principles of equity and fairness, especially concerning the closure of the north side of the gym? Promotion of equal rights. We emphasise the importance of promoting equal rights for everyone, including youth. How does the current approach reflect this commitment? Conclusion. In conclusion, we urge Council to reconsider its decision and recommendations to prioritise the wellbeing and recreational opportunities of the youth, particularly those involved in gravity mountain bike riding. The consequences of the current course of action are profound, affecting not only the physical health but also the mental wellbeing of these young individuals, which correlates with recent research and statistics on a lack of physical activity and exposure to nature found in the links below. We call upon Council to leave a legacy of forward-thinking decisions that truly reflect the needs of the majority of residents and to support our youth in their pursuit of happiness, health and community connection. Past research has shown that adults who identify themselves as environmentalists or conservationists almost always had some transcendent experience in the natural world. What happens if that personal experience virtually disappears? There will always be conservationists and environmentalists, but if we don't turn this trend around, they'll increasingly carry nature in their briefcases, not in their hearts, and that's a very different relationship. As we deliberate on the decisions made by Council, it's essential to contemplate the legacy the Council aims to establish in the Southern Highlands. Will the Council be remembered as an institution that embraced forward thinking and took actions that genuinely reflected the needs and well-being of the majority, particularly the youth? Does the Council prioritise the welfare of families and the flourishing of the young generation? Or are these policies mere checkboxes on an administrative to-do list? We urge the Council to consider the lasting repercussions of its choices. We implore the Council to preserve the long-standing track for the riders while concurrently devising plans to address the broader community's needs. Neglecting the well-being of our youth and erasing their beloved activities could yield severe consequences that will not easily be forgotten by the community. Regrettably, recent events have left many young individuals apprehensive about pursuing outdoor activities they once cherished, a situation that no one should be proud of. The boys, just for everyone's knowledge, on the weekend sat home depressed, playing an Xbox game of mountain bike riding. Is this what we want for our youth? I would like this table, please.
Richard McDonald.
Administrator, General Manager, Council, local community. We acknowledge the decision by Council to carry out the REF. However, it's inexcusable that the Wingecarribee Shire Council has not clearly outlined a way forward for an alternative trail to be built if the status quo is not allowed for the mountain bike riders to use part of the existing unauthorised jib trails. As we've had little time to review the draft RAF report, more time for public consultation should be allowed before the final report can be tabled and approved by Council. As an interim point in question to the draft RAF report, part of the supposed unauthorised mountain bike trails mapped by Wingecarribee Shire Council is in fact an existing walking and mountain bike trail that has been there for many years before the boys started on the unauthorised trails. At the very high end of the supposed unauthorised trails that's detailed in the RAF report, 205 metres of this existing trail, which is approximately 40% of the unauthorised trails mapped by Council, that also passes through the disputed private land, is actually untouched and not used by mountain bike riders. This needs to be acknowledged and amended in the draft RAF report. Okay. Independent of the RAF report, we also wish to bring to the Council attention the following. Over the last 20 years, it has been documented in surrounding councils that when mountain bike trails are closed, new trails will open elsewhere, and the cycle of old and new unauthorised trails being built will continue. And this is another point brought up by a previous speaker. Due to the publicity of the unauthorised trails on social media, some of the boys involved in the original building of the trails no longer ride them, even though Council has allowed them, and this has been due to intimidating action of Bushcare volunteers. In the ordinary Council meeting on the 19th of July 2023, the Administrator stated, and I quote, "The Landcare Group can't do what they wanted to do without consent and direction from the Council. The General Manager, Mr Davis, confirmed that any bushcare workers not authorised by Council will be subjected to penalties." Now, a week and a half ago, I was out there with the boys and we're actually measuring the trails to assist in response to the impending RAF report. However, it was unfortunate that a supporter of bushcare verbally admitted on camera to physically participating in track tampering and laying of debris across the unauthorised trails. This was recorded on video. My question to Council is, will the Manager of Council, Mr Davis, stand by his words regarding this above matter and apply penalties to this person? Another question is also, which was really unfortunate actually, I don't know why these environmental groups are doing this, is that some of the environmental groups, who I can't name, within Wingecarribee Shire Council have been actively targeting parents, workplaces with falsely written letters stating that the parents have been involved in illegal activities in the Jib Reserve, which is totally unacceptable. Okay. We also wish to note that Landcare and Wind Zero have been actively requesting supporters of Landcare and Wind Zero to passively intimidate and take photos of mountain bike riders, even though they have been allowed by Council to ride the unauthorised trails. I therefore then wish to highlight and request, as a ratepayer of the environmental levy that supports these bushcare groups, an explanation as to why Council will continue to support the bushcare groups when supporters of bushcare admittedly and verbally admit on camera to physically carrying out unauthorised works and passively intimidating young members of the community.
Thank you for having me. I put my hand up as a third party involved in this situation with no emotional contact with the children, the Landcare groups, no matter what. I've got a prior background in the mountain bike industry for 20 years, including trail advocacy. I grew up in the Wollongong region where I dealt with this as youth. I was a former national downhill champion. I was a former state champion. All the while, unsanctioned trails were a common thing in Wollongong. We faced these battles while I was in this situation. They were closing down 3 trails in the area Now, 20 years later, there's 55 trails that exist, and the original trails still exist. I've put my hand up as an advocate to work with the youth, the land care groups, everyone, to develop a strategy to move forward from this. I've never supported finalising the jib situation. I've moved forwards in working with the mountain bike club. I'm the downhill advocate for the club now. They've elected me into it. I've dealt with councillors' volunteer situation in this. I haven't written anything out because Sean contacted me via a separate email that he's never had contact with me over on Monday afternoon, after we've had an email trail for 10 or more emails with a generally used one. He's gone out of his way to source a secondary email to invite me along as a stakeholder in this thing, so I have nothing prepared. I met with your council guys and I offered an alternative solution as an interim at the Welby Trail Network, to which has been shut down. This was a solution that would have squashed all the dramas between the land care group and the kids, and we would have provided a facility, and I had volunteers ready to build it. Council have now squashed this as an option, whilst it was still in an area that's already approved as a mountain bike facility. Moving forwards, it's very hard to see a way that the kids are going to benefit out of this, aside from being forced into building more unsanctioned trails. I've put forwards an actual opportunity at no cost to council to provide a facility where you can shut down the jib and we move forwards from this with a long-term goal of developing the Welby site into a fully fledged tourist facility. All that I've approached in this are battles with council, and I've done it as a small business owner locally in the area, a single dad. I've volunteered to help you guys, and all that's happened from this is council have gone out and started destroying further trails that were pre-existing the June 21st date. I've submitted information regarding trees being cut down in existing trails by council staff, which is detrimental to both the land care group and the kids involved in it. So in terms of decommissioning trails, council have taken the stand of environmental damage. I've also been able to supply you guys with the email correspondence from Matt Ward from Trailcare, who's a trail advocate. He works alongside councils and he offered you guys free services from the get-go, from May 13th, to be able to squash this immediately and provide a solution. Matt Ward sources state funding in regards to many facilities, and he's successfully built mountain bike parks on tip sites, which he was willing to offer you guys services for, and nobody from council responded to him. This whole process has ended up in a severe waste of ratepayer money for an outcome that is still going to end up in more illegal, unsanctioned trails being built. I propose that we put forward doing an interim facility in the Welby Trail Network, where there's already been REFs carried out regarding the existing trail system. I ticked all the boxes that the kids were after, the council were after. We met with the council and no one took it seriously anyway. I've wasted time as a volunteer for this outcome, and the only way forward, if this does not happen, you will be chasing your tail for the next 20 years like Wollongong are on unsanctioned trails. The first shovels have been put down on Wollongong to finally build an 80k trail network, and it's taken that long to do. We have an opportunity at the moment where everyone can be involved. We can rehabilitate the jib situation. We can turn Welby into an actual mountain bike park where people come into the community, and we can all move forwards from this. But it doesn't seem like council involved has any intentions of that happening at the moment. So I've come forwards as the downhill representative from the Highlands Trails crew. Council's been out destroying unsanctioned trails immediately without REF reports. I'm putting forward that we might develop an actual facility in the interim before the jib situation is closed off, and then we can work towards building a proper mountain bike community that works alongside the land care groups. That way, we don't have these culture war battles that are unnecessary, that have turned into a massive political shitstorm, essentially. Yeah, that's it.
First of all, I'll table that. There's also an electronic version, already been provided. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. Okay, so here we go. Reading from the manual. Introduction. I have nil involvement in biking activities of any kind. My concerns are, to support Geordie's position, as a matter of fact, my concerns are the pervasive green has infected all levels of government, resulting in constant assaults on our liberty. This Shire is not exempt. Falls straight into your lap. The risk-averse litigious society and all official processes that cocoon us. Endless compliance to fit a given mandated mould. Commitments made to the United Nations fuels at least green agendas. There's an annexure which is provided in there which will provide exactly what I mean. I won't read that out here. Both adults and youth clearly have nil validity compared to the dominant green and Aboriginal priorities. And from all of that, our eroded liberties where processes and enforced compliance to sacrosanct policies outweighs our ever-diminishing freedoms. This is all of us. And aside, local greenies have made a number of false claims, one of which is the role of the Jib as a connected wildlife corridor. It is not. Mount Gibraltar is an island, well separated by a perimeter road network and housing. Nonetheless, it is an important area where land care volunteers do sterling work to help rid it of invasive species. Specifically, Council has followed process and, among other necessary steps, engaged an environmental expert to report on the damage done to Mount Gibraltar Reserve. From the report summary in item 9.2 of this OGM, in isolation, the damage is deemed of sufficient magnitude as to warrant closing the tracks. More on this soon. Speaking of that, has someone got the controller for the slideshow? This typical green lock-it-up behaviour that has nationally seen repeated and massive environmental destruction, but nonetheless falls conveniently into the green slots in bureaucracies, again reinforcing that point made earlier. That is how the green infection operates at all levels of government and how we are all impotent victims. Importantly, Council has failed to consider, quote, the reserve is owned by our community, held and managed by Wingecarribee Shire Council. That's the last page of the Land Care publication. Question 1. As the reserve is apparently owned by the community, then in a genuine democratic society, the community must have the input as to how that reserve can be best used. If that is true, what steps will be taken by Council to engage the whole community, whilst in the interim continuing to permit the use by non-motorised bikes? That's a question that I think should be answered one of these days. Question 2. A substantial community survey that was overwhelmingly in favour of the kids being able to sensibly use a small part of the reserve, and it appears green process that favours a select few is to dominate, reinforcing that point made earlier. Is it possible that the reserve use be legally altered to suit wider community needs that have greater or equal validity, such as enabling the healthy development of youth? Another example of systemic green bias. In 2020, an Environment Advisory Committee was formed after a biased and incorrect presentation by Extinction Rebellion. I was excluded, whereas those chosen wore various shades of green, some extreme. The result, of course, is by design, a bias committee that supports a green bias bureaucracy. Quantum and perspective, absent in the environmental report summary. Now, I've got 7 slides here to show. There we go. Now, how do I move this on? Just forward, I presume. Now, this slide shows the reserve with the fire trail and the bike track. If you see that text up the top and it points with an arrow pointing down to the little squiggly white line, that is the bike track. The barely discernible white line is the extent of the bike track that is apparently dissolving the jib. Most have been there for decades, enjoyed by generations of kids, and the jib is still there. The bike track relative to the reserve, that's that little bit there. Fire trail and bike track with chainage, because being a civil engineer, that's the sort of thing I do, went out and measured the chainage, measured the type of track, etc., did an assessment, which you'll see very soon. Whoops, must have tried that again. Okay, to make it clearer, that little squiggly white line is the area that they're talking about. Personally, I'd like to see it expanded and actually cater for kids in the variety of biking activities. Now, whoops, I've done it again. This is an simple Excel spreadsheet. I won't go into reading everything, but that Excel spreadsheet has been provided to council. Oh, I've done it again. Right, the calcs, and this is the result. The calcs follow a measured survey of tracks types. The track width is a total vegetation disturbance, not just the actual track. Furthermore, the width, I've added a further metre. The reserve area of the jib is 1.3 million square metres. The maximum area used by the kids is 798 square metres. That is 0.061% of the reserve. The areas noted in the environmental report as being a disaster, that's 100 square metres, is 0.015% of the reserve. And that's enough to kill the whole exercise? It's absurd. That's it. Question, no, more. Question 3, 2 parts. Given the area occupied by the kids for their non-motorised biking is so insignificant and the usual fears of erosion, habitat loss, etc. are now relative, what is more beneficial to our society? 1, continuing to lock things up to suit a select vested interest group and their usual fear campaigns of assorted environmental deaths, or 2, engaging the community that owns the land and do so via council in an informed local referendum where the owners can advise council regarding the preferred use of the reserve lands for various community purposes. Last question. To again demonstrate systemic bias, motherhood statements. 2 things, Youth Strategy and Action Plan 2016-2026, Community Engagement Strategy 2023. On one hand, council has gone great lengths to specify how council must support the community and youth groups, but has done exactly the opposite to favour the select groups, such as those who lock everything up to preserve the rare and endangered insert name of species, because the insert from standard selection list closes everything down. As Professor Julia Sumner Miller would ask, why is it so? Recommendations. As managers of the reserve, that council continues to allow youth to have access to and use that small area of land, despite great noise from a few. 2, that council with assorted media outlets undertake a process to inform and involve the local community at large, to ultimately undertake a public referendum to let the owners of the land direct how this reserve and maybe other reserves are to be used. 3, that the youth be permitted to use a defined area of the reserve with physical modifications to cater for both safety and personal challenge. And 4, that the obstructive greenie types who have already caused angst, disruption and even danger to the kids face appropriate and meaningful penalties should they again obfuscate. Conclusion. This affects us all. Since the 1970s, the Green and other leftist indoctrination has infected youth and entire political and bureaucratic systems, this Shire being no exception. The results of that social engineering we are now witnessing locally and throughout societies on a global scale. This must change such that processes serve the people, not people serve processes. Here, a well-adjusted, responsible, informed and independently thinking youth is vital to this nation advancing. That will not be achieved whenever a few very noisy, very few are unsatisfied with 99.94% of the land. They demand 100% control. Our future generation of adults seek to use a mere 0.061%, half of 1%. And yet that is denied them by both Greenies and government processes. Change the process.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak at this public forum on item 920, Mount Gibraltar Unauthorised Mountain Bike Track Review of Environmental Factors. Okay. Sorry. I support the officer's recommendation that Council closes and decommissions the unauthorised mountain bike track in the northeast area of Mount Gibraltar Heritage Reserve. The REF provides a comprehensive and clear assessment of the impacts of these unauthorised mountain bike tracks, confirming the environmental and planning compliance concerns of many community members, particularly those who have cared for the reserve for over 30 years. I look forward to all the unauthorised mountain bike tracks in the reserve being fully decommissioned and the areas rehabilitated in a timely manner, assuming that this gets approved. I ask that regular status reports are provided to the community on the progress and final completion of the decommissioning and rehabilitation works.
Excuse me, I was terribly rude. I just asked the General Manager a question.
Oh, sorry.
And I missed the first bit, which you just said then. I apologise.
Okay. I look forward to all the unauthorised mountain bike tracks in the reserve being fully decommissioned and the areas rehabilitated in a timely manner, assuming that this gets approved or carried or whatever the word is. I ask that regular status reports are provided to the community on the progress and final completion of the decommissioning and rehabilitation works. On a sort of related matter, from my perspective, it would be helpful if status reporting was provided for all actions adopted by Council, whether in meetings, extraordinary meetings of councils, or documented in strategies, master plans, action plans. How does the community or councillors keep track on whether these actions have or are being implemented in a timely manner, are waiting for grant or other funding, or have fallen through cracks? Is this something that this could be addressed before new councillors are elected? We have a lot of plans out there and strategies out there, not just for the youth, but for the whole community, that are waiting to be implemented, and whether it's waiting for funding or resourcing or things like that. And it's very difficult to find out what's actually happening with those, to get an overview of everything that's out there, not just select things. The publication of the REF is also an opportunity for the community to understand the careful planning and environmental assessments that need to be completed by Council before development or activities are undertaken on Council-owned or managed land. And that is in recognition of the hard work that Council staff put in, or their contractors put in, to actually go through all of the legislation, all of the compliance things that need to be done. And there's a lot of work that actually goes into that. It's also an opportunity for the need that people understand that they have to obtain consent and work with Council before undertaking the works, particularly within our beautiful bushland reserves. Just one last thing. I'm really going to have to run. I've got other commitments to go, so I will apologise. I've probably only got another 5 minutes that I can spend here. So thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Does anybody else want to be heard in relation to this matter? You just come forward, mate. You just state your name, not your address, just your name for the record.
My name's Wilson Maloof. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to attend the past council meetings about the problems with the Mount Gibraltar trails, but fortunately I've been informed by my friends, so I do have quite a clear understanding of what's been discussed through these meetings and what could happen to the trails. From my understanding, the council has noticed that the mountain biking community of the Southern Highlands has started to popularise the Mount Gibraltar trails recently, even though they have existed for numerous years. As we have become familiar with these trails, we have tried expanding our trails throughout the bushland, and we have been informed by park rangers, the council and locals that unknowingly we have been accidentally damaging small percentages of the bushland. We as mountain bikers have absolutely no intent on purposely damaging any of the fauna, flora and land around us, as it is a special place for us where we can enjoy our passion in mountain biking. The main trail on the Mount Gibraltar has existed for numerous years, and over these years, it has been carefully sculpted through an extremely small percentage of the national park. These trails have managed to attract attention from the mountain biking community, and over this time, it has become what some people would describe to be a second home, where they are able to connect with friends from all over the Southern Highlands and further. These trails have been ridden by a large variety of ages, ranging from 8 to 70 years old, and it gives riders the chance to connect with other riders and enjoy the sport we all love all at the same time. Us boys have put hundreds of hours into making these tracks safe and enjoyable, and I think it would be safe to say that I speak for all the people in the Southern Highlands mountain biking community when I say that it would be absolutely devastating if the Mount Gibraltar trails were taken away from us. It would not only damage our love for mountain biking, but it would also affect so many friendships. Personally, I have been lucky enough to ride the trails nearly every weekend of every year. I know that if the trails were taken down, that I would be deeply affected, and many of the friendships that I was able to create purely from riding at these trails would be lost. Rather than having the trails destroyed, we think that it would be a great idea to work alongside the council, park rangers and locals who live in the area so that you can help us to understand how to keep the bushland in the pristine condition that it is now, while also being able to expand and maintain our trails so that we have a safe and enjoyable track to ride on. Thank you so much for taking the time today.
Everyone is happy? Well, have you had a fair say? Okay, I now move that we resume into open council. So that's the formalities come back again. And I'd ask the General Manager to report on correspondence we've received since this business paper was produced on Friday.
Thank you, Mr. May. Apologies for that. I was ahead of myself. So we have a letter that was received on Sunday evening from Jane Laman. We have another letter from Mary Taylor. Another letter from Gay White on behalf of Win Zero. An email and accompanying letter from Alex Cooper. An email from Ian and Jane Pye. An email from Lyndall Breen. An email from Lou Flower on behalf of the Southern Highlands Land Care Network Incorporated. An email from May and Norm Nelson. An email from Rowena Parry. An email from Christine Goodwin. An email from Andy Laman, and we also received a petition containing 450 signatures. Thank you, Mr. May.
Can I ask whether the submissions that were verbally given could also be incorporated into the minutes? We know the names of the people who did it, and I think that it's important that they're recorded into the minutes as well. General Manager.
Yes, Mr. May. just before I hand over to the manager assets, Mr. Robinson, to introduce the item, there were some just broad comments about the reporting in terms of the status of plans and also how we report on the environment levy, how people know what's happening. So just to explain the process in a very broad sense about how we incorporate plans that council prepares throughout the year, how that then is enacted. The plans that are prepared are considered each year, usually around April, May, when we produce our draft operational plan and our draft budget. Those two documents draw down on plans of management or youth strategies or library strategies into an annual delivery or an annual operational plan. It's how we actually deliver. We then report at the end of each quarter back to council, and there's quite a comprehensive report where we report against each of those actions for the 12-month period, for the end of September period, end of December period, end of March period. We also, at the end of June, prepare an annual report. That annual report is presented to council at the November council meeting and is then published on council's website. In that annual report, we specifically report back against how we've spent the environmental levy. And in last year's annual report, I believe it appears on page 58. So that's how we make sure that we integrate the actions out of all of those individual plans into our annual and into our budget, and also report back. And at each of those sessions, we also provide a presentation. So I'll now hand over to Mr. Robinson to talk or introduce the item. And if I can also ask that you and the Director also respond to some of the points that the speakers made. Thank you.
No worries. Thank you, General Manager. Mr. May, the purpose of this report is to seek Council's endorsement for the decommissioning of the unauthorised mountain bike track in the north-east area of Mount Gibraltar Heritage Reserve. In accordance with the resolutions of Council from the 21st of June and 19th of July ordinary Council meetings, ecological surveys and planning were engaged to prepare a review of environmental factors, or REF, on these unauthorised trails to determine if they do or do not have a significant environmental impact. The draft REF is attached to the Council report, but I believe that the conclusions of the REF can be seen through three primary points. The first one being that the two side trails that cross the creek are deemed to be of significant environmental impact in their current form, and so they cannot be approved through the REF. As such, they require closure and decommissioning. Point number two is that there is an upper section of the track, albeit it is outside of the section that is most heavily used. That is approximately about 50 metres within private property, and so as the REF can only be used for facilities on public land, it does require closure and decommissioning. And then for the remaining sections of the track, the draft REF identifies that to reach a final stage of determination, several specialist studies and track augmentation would be required to enable even just the possibility of a final determination of no significant impact. These additional specialist studies would include an Aboriginal cultural heritage assessment, which, pending the outcomes, could require an Aboriginal heritage impact permit, as well as the Statement of Heritage Impact and Section 60 application to Heritage New South Wales, given the state heritage significance of the site. The completion of these additional studies and the augmentation would be of significant investment, both financially and time. And so it is understood that notwithstanding, it is unlikely that all of these can still be navigated whilst maintaining a no significant impact, which would be required as part for the final determination of the REF. In light of these constraints, it's therefore recommended that Council close and decommission the unauthorised mountain bike trails in this north-east area of Mount Gibraltar Heritage Reserve. In relation to, I guess, a number of the points raised, I'll do my best to address the ones that I can recall and the ones that I can address. I do want to acknowledge that the riders, I believe, have held themselves with exemplary conduct throughout the last 6 months. And I do think that it is a testament to yourselves and your character, the commitment that you have shown the process, albeit even when it feels like that hasn't been, I guess, reciprocated. And so I do want to acknowledge that. Part of the process, though, is that the process was to assess the track. And yes, it was the assessment process. It wasn't a foregone conclusion in that sense. I can appreciate the frustration that's associated with some of the requirements around additional specialist studies. However, as I've communicated at the start, we do work in a legislative framework. We are a regulated society, and so these specialist studies are just the outworkings of the state and federal legislation that we work under and within. As part of the 21st of June council meeting, although it might not feel like it at the time, and I can appreciate the disappointment, council has shown a commitment to a pragmatic approach to mountain biking within the Shire. That is primarily to be through the upcoming Natural Areas Recreation Activities Strategy, or NARAS, which will look at how we can best provide not only mountain biking, but other bushland recreation activities across the Shire. As part of that, the primary, I guess, thrust of the pragmatic approach was that pre-existing trails that existed up to that 21st of June council meeting date would not be actively decommissioned until there was the outcomes of the NARAS. The exception was made for these trails at Mount Gibraltar, given their sensitivity and the prominence, and so that was brought forward to be considered through this REF process. I do acknowledge that we are now considering, I guess, other opportunities, given that the NARAS, like all strategies, will have an extended time frame. And so, as has been mentioned, there is discussions around an augmentation of the existing trails at Welby. I believe a site visit was undertaken in August. And again, I can appreciate that things might feel slow, but we do we operate within a planning framework, and so things take time. The other opportunity being considered and investigated is those associated with the remediation of the Welby landfill site. And as part of the current design phase, it's looking at options around the capping, which can then enable various passive or active recreation facilities on top of that facility. I believe that's all I have at the moment, sorry.
Does the Director have any comment in relation to?
No, I think Sean has covered off on what we needed to cover off on.
Thank you. Look, I'd just like to, first of all, address what Travis had to say finally, that it's been a waste of time. I can assure you it hasn't been a waste of time. You've rattled the bars, and you've now got the professional officers in this place thinking, how do we address this issue? Now, whether it's a gravity fall, you call it gravity fall, don't you, whatever it is, I don't know. But you haven't wasted your time, let me assure you. As Sean said, the council has to comply with the rules too. And it's clear from reading that there's a lot of hoops to jump through, and I have my doubts, the same as the professional officers do, whether you can jump through those hoops. It's really as simple as that. And the council exposes itself if it doesn't comply with what the law says. But having said that, I am going to move the recommendation but add some extra stuff to it. Some parts which I thought about on the weekend, but another part, 2 parts as a result of what I've heard today, so we can take this matter forward. So I would move the officer's recommendation 1 and 2, and then I gave this to the staff earlier. I might blow that up so people can read it. Everyone see that? A bit more, if we can. Okay. Number 3, the General Manager ensure that there is continued monitoring of the illegal track construction and usage of the Mount Gibraltar bike track, especially during weekends and public holidays. 4, the final costs of the studies, I think it should be, rather than study, we'll come back to that, associated with the illegal use of Mount Gibraltar and decommissioning be reported to Council with the community and recreational strategies. No, I want to take that part out. So the final costs associated with the legal use of Mount Gibraltar Reserve and decommissioning be reported to Council in conjunction with the next quarterly financial statement. Then Council note that further options for mountain bike facilities will be considered through the Natural Areas Recreation Activity Strategy, and any capping of the former Welby tip site allow for passive and active recreation, and that is something that wasn't happening before all this started. 6, Council note that officers will continue to collaborate with local mountain bike riders to ensure that any selected site and future mountain bike facilities, if facility is fit for purpose and provides opportunity for partnering in track creation and maintenance. And then following on what Ms McPherson said, an update on the Youth Strategies Action Plan 2016-2026 be provided to Council within 3 months. And a final one, that the General Manager meet with Mr Copecto to discuss Welby Tip and the offer mentioned of Matt Ward to be discussed and reported back as a part of the further report on Welby Tip. Did you get that? If I could just say while that's being prepared, Mr Cunningham has left, but I'll ring him tomorrow. He may wish to make this submission to the Department of Planning, who now have the draft plan of management for Mount Gibraltar, if he feels strongly about what the Council has done in relation to Mount Gibraltar in consultation with the community, the draft plan of management. We're still waiting to hear back from them. So it's an opportunity for him to make those representations if he so desires. I apologise. This is read in conjunction with the officer's recommendation, and then the additional 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 and 8 on the screen, and I declare that carried. We've got quite a way to go with the agenda, so if people wish to retire, feel free. Okay, we will move on. The next item is 9.17, the Bowral Classic. General Manager.
Thank you, Mr. May. Mr. Kloppers will introduce this item. Thank you.
Thank you, General Manager. Thank you, General Manager. Mr. May, the Bowral Classic is one of 4 Australian Cycle Classic experiences. The event has been running in Bowral since 2016. For 2022, Wingecarribee Shire Council waived fees valued at $6,348.82 for the event. The Bowral Classic requested sponsorship from Council to the value of $10,000 for the event to be held during 2023. The policy states that sponsorships must contribute in a number of ways as outlined in the report. Mr. May, it's estimated that approximately 4,000 visitors for the event spend an average of $438 a day, on average stay 2 days in the region, and contribute all in all around $3.5 million to the local economy. Mr. May, our report detail a number of the benefits, the additional benefits of the event further. We commend the recommendation to you.
We don't have our own information on the spend like we had from Borealis, and which we'll get from the Tulips, and we'll get from this year, we'll get from the bike race. Is that right?
Sorry, say again. My apologies.
I said that, well, you might be able to.
I could perhaps illuminate a little bit of that. So our data comes from a few places. First of all, SpendMat tells us credit card spending on particular days.
Yeah, but we don't have that for last year's Bowral Classic, do we?
Yes, we do. It was, I think, from memory, around about $185,000 was the data that SpendMap gave us. But the data doesn't take into account, and there's really no way that we can, the accommodation spend in the area. So
yeah, look, I shouldn't. You were doing minute stuff, and I apologise.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Look, I have some severe reservations about this, but I'm happy to hear what the community says in relation to it. But I want to just change the recommendation a tad to acknowledge the Council's grants, donations and sponsorship policy. The Council doesn't give any public money to any organisation unless they get the audited financial reports first. So this, I just want to make sure that Yaffa Media understand that before we go through this process. So I would move that subject to Yaffa Media providing its audited financial statements for the 2022 Barrel Classic, in accordance with Council's grants, donations and sponsorship policy, and then 1 and 2 from the recommendation. I've changed it slightly. The audited financial statements from the 2022, we don't want Yaffa's financial statements for the company, just in relation to the Barrel Classic from last year. Yeah, just take out the 23. Look, the reality is that they would know the policy. I just want to make sure that they understand. Thank you. Declare that carried. Next one is General Manager 9.18, Christmas Activations 2023.
Yes, thank you, Mr. May. The Manager, Community Life and Libraries, is going to introduce this item, Mr. Kloppers, unless you want to talk about Christmas. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, General Manager. Mr. May, the purpose of this report is to inform Council and seek endorsement for the proposed program of Christmas activations across Wingecarribee Shire for 2023, including proposed budget breakdown. So Council has an adopted budget of $100,000 to provide various Christmas activities in Wingecarribee. As outlined in the report, in previous years this included hire and installation of Christmas trees across the 3 main town centres. This year it is proposed in the $100,000 allocation to give $25,000 to the Festival of Lights. So we have a remaining $75,000, and I believe the Festival of Lights reports after this one. So as part of our process in considering activations for this year, Council sought quotes for hire and installation of Christmas trees once again, and this cost came out in at $56,100. To have the 3 trees across the town centres. As such, we thought it was time to rethink how we use that $75,000 and how we celebrate Christmas spirit and cheer across the Shire. It also provided an opportunity to actually consolidate everything we do as a council into one Christmas program. So as part of the planning process, council officers met with the village associations. Not all could attend, but many were there, Business Southern Highlands and Grow Southern Highlands, to discuss options. So based on what we heard and taking into consideration feedback we've received previously, so from the 2021 Christmas as well as 2022 about the cost of the trees, we developed a new program. So what we're proposing is to, rather than having hired fake Christmas trees installed in the town centres, we're proposing to actually do installations in the 3 town centres. So, for example, here in Mossvale, in Leighton Gardens. So that will be a collaboration between children, young people, various community groups, schools, to yarn bomb or decorate bomb or whatever that looks like. So those locations, and also to install flags and fairy lights, etc. We're also proposing to give the village associations the grants once again, so that was really well received last year, but what we're proposing is to actually up that funding by about $500 to $1,000 for the big town centres within the villages, but also the smaller villages. So that could be used for those villages to use solar lighting, but they've already planned what they're proposing to do, and it's quite incredible what they do deliver with that amount of money. We're also proposing to have Christmas outdoor movies. That's what we were hearing from the community across the town centres, and festive pop-up carolers across the Shire, so to create a bit of Christmas spirit. I believe these activities, and council officers believe, that it provides an opportunity to set a new standard for what Christmas is in Wingecarribee and to reflect Wingecarribee and the various villages and town centres.
Can I just clarify that in 2022, there were no light-up Christmas tree events.
Yes, that's correct. So when I wrote the report, I thought there was. There was conjecture. Everyone was saying there was, and everyone was saying there wasn't.
Well,
I can confirm there was not in 2022. It was in 21.
Yeah, it wasn't. It was in an earlier report, which
Yes,
you've obviously used to
I
prepare
apologise
this.
for that.
The question I have is that the Christmas carols that used to be held on Bradman Oval in Bowral, I understand, are now going to be held in Corbett Gardens. Is some of the extra money that the council is giving, I suppose it's probably the next one, but it's all about Christmas, is some of that money being used to subsidise that?
Yes, Mr. May, that is one of the additional activities that Festival of Lights was able to put on with the additional funding.
And the council is getting, or the community is getting, a suitable acknowledgement out of that?
Yes, I will.
Yeah, okay. Look, thanks very much. Look, you weren't here last year, but I was worried about the cost of these Christmas trees last year. I'd rather invest the money in people than plastic. And I think all the community organisations and the community groups are agreeing with that, so well done. Okay, in relation to item 9.18, Christmas activations, I'd move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 160 of the business paper and declare it carried. The next item is Festival of Lights post-exhibition report.
Okay, thank you. Now, Mr. Cloppers will introduce this item. Thank you.
Mr. May, at the council meeting dated 19th of July 2023, council resolved to enter into a public notice period around providing Festival of Lights with financial assistance and the waiving of certain fees. Mr. May, 11 submissions were received, not all of them positive, detailed in the report. I'll take all of those as read and not go through them one by one. The recommendation is to endorse an amount of $25,000 to be provided to the Festival of Lights, subject to council receiving recognition for this, of course, and a further fee waiver for the use of the senior rooms at the Senior Citizens Hall at Corbett Gardens for the event, and that totals up an amount up to $7,000, Mr. May.
Fabulous. And the extra money and the actual 25,000 is very, very good value for money because so many volunteers are involved in this true community spirit. And you know the Santa Claus is happening again this year in the old Senior Citizen Centre. Yeah. Oh, that's fabulous. Okay, in relation to item 9.19, I move the officer's recommendation 1 and 2 on page 165 of the business paper and declare that carried. We've done Mount Gibraltar, Colo Vale Railway.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. May. Mr. Robinson will speak to this item. Oh!
What happened? You right?
I'm all good. Thank you, General Manager. Mr. May, the purpose of this report is to seek Council's endorsement for the allocation of funds remaining from the sale of 42 Banksia Street, Colivale. In accordance with the resolution of Council from 20th of May 2021, the proceeds from the sale of the land that housed the old Rural Fire Service shed were to be reinvested within Colivale Village, according to the outcomes of consultation with the residents. Net proceeds from the sale were $457,000. $130,000 of that has been donated to the Colivale Men's Shed for them to undertake repairs and refurbishment of their facilities. And it is proposed that the remaining $327,000 is allocated to an upgrade or provision of additional facilities within Colivale Railway Park. This investment location is supported by the Colivale Community Association as well as by the results of the consultation they have conducted. Given that the site is located within the rail corridor, landowner approval and a licence from Transport Asset Holding Entity is required. This can at times be an extended process, and so in parallel with this licensing process, a community engagement exercise will be undertaken to inform the final scope for the park upgrade. It's therefore recommended that Council endorse the allocation of funding to the Collavale Railway Park upgrade.
Unrelated but related, has the men's shed been finalised, finished?
I can confirm that the funds have been transferred. I'm not aware of the status of the actual work itself.
Look, this railway, Heritage Railway, is taking an age. Have they started any work yet, do you know? Or?
I believe they've commenced some establishment works along the railway itself, but I believe that their primary phase is still in the planning approval stage.
You know, what worries me is the value of the money goes down all the time. Our money for the Collavale. Is it feasible to organise this licence agreement quicker than what they're progressing with their studies for the railway?
Yes. So the two projects will happen in parallel, like they're independent of each other.
Well, look, I think we should try and engage the local member in this one because Ms Hannon's already helping us with Hilltop. So I think Collavale is in her electorate too, and she might be able to give them a bit of a hurry along. So I would move the officer's recommendation. Number 2, the assistance of the member for Walladilly be sought to expedite the necessary licence agreements to ensure the upgrade is delivered expeditiously. You know, you don't get a lot of equipment for the money we're spending, but we'll get even less if it's 5 years' time. So I declare that carried. 9.12, rising water main upgrade. General Manager.
Thank you, Mr. May. The Manager Water Services, Mr. Mellor, will speak to this item. Thank you.
Thank you, General Manager. Mr. May. The purpose of this report is to present the evaluation of the request for tender for the sewer pump station, MT6.
Louder, or put it closer. Yeah.
There we go. The purpose of the report is to present the evaluation of the request for tender for the sewer pump station MT6 sewer rising main upgrade. The purpose of the project is to increase the size of the existing rising sewer main pipe, which will increase the pump station flow capacity. Increasing the discharge pipe size increases the sewer pump station discharge capacity from 2.7 litres per second to 8.5 litres per second. And this will assist in ensuring that the likelihood of a spill event to Natai Rivulet is minimised as the emergency storage tank will be emptied more rapidly. The project is being coordinated with the reconstruction of the Devon Street and Robertson Street roadways and culvert, as the road crossing the Natai Rivulet was severely damaged by recent floods and remains closed. The existing sewer rising main was exposed by the stormwater flow and is currently suspended in mid-air without support. So this represents a risk of uncontrolled raw sewage release to the environment in the event of pipe failure. Therefore, the reconstruction of the sewer rising main should proceed as a matter of urgency. As such, the recommendation is that Council accepts the tender from Killard Infrastructure for the sewer rising main upgrade at a lump sum price of $333,420, inclusive of GST. Tenders received range from $306,000 to $780,000, inclusive GST. And yeah, if we could
thank you.
Accept
in relation to item 9.22, rising main sewer rising main upgrade, I'd move the officer's recommendation on page 179 of the business paper 1, 2, and 3, and declare that carried. 9.23, Traffic Management Services, General Manager.
Thank you, Mr. May. Mr. Bray, the Manager, the Shire presentation, will introduce this item. Thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you, General Manager. Mr. May, the purpose of this report is to present the evaluation of the request for tender for traffic management services. Council conducted an open tender process for the purpose of establishing a contract to engage traffic management services to Council. The tender invited contractors to submit rates for two categories: Category 1, Traffic Control Services, and Category 2, Traffic Control and Management Planning Services. The initial contract will be for a period of 5 years. Council has tendered these services for the purpose of reviewing and benchmarking the market while maintaining probity and transparency. The tender advertising period was from 25 July 23 to 15 August 23, a total of 21 days. A total of 16 tender submissions were received. Upon evaluation, a total of 5 tender submissions were determined to be non-compliant. The tender evaluation panel agreed to award a panel size of 6 for both contract categories in accordance with Council's operational requirements. In conclusion, Council has a need to maintain traffic management services to ensure that Council can efficiently source various contractors on an ad hoc basis for Council's operational needs on delivering Council capital works, events and maintenance programs. Thank you.
There was no local response.
There wasn't, no.
Do they normally respond?
We've gone up before. No, they haven't. No.
So are they not in the big league, or just?
No, they've done work for us prior to this, yes, but for some reason they didn't respond. No. The main traffic control company locally is Highlands Traffic Control, I think it's called. But they do exist, but they didn't apply for the tender.
Yeah. Oh, well, it was a public tender, so in relation to item 9.23, traffic management services, I'd move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 185 of the business paper, 1, 2 and 3, and declare that carried. 9.24, amendment to fees and charges. General Manager.
Thank you, Mr. May. The acting CFO, Mr. Conrad.
Thank you, General Manager. Council and Community was presented with a series of amendments to the adopted 23-24 fees and charges at the ordinary meeting on 19th July 2023. The online consultation hub received 436 visitors and 400 document downloads, and that was between the period 24 July to the 28th of August. We'd like to thank the residents who took the time to provide feedback on the amended fees and charges. Responses are provided on each of the submissions within the Council report. However, no changes are proposed from these submissions received. Thank you.
Thank you very much. In relation to item 9.24, amendment to fees and charges, I would move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 192 of the business paper and declare that carried. Code of Conduct, General Manager.
Thank you, Mr. May. Manager, Governance and Corporate Performance, Ms. Lidgard will introduce this item. Thank you.
Thank you, General Manager. The purpose of this report is to propose a change to Part 6 of Council's Code of Conduct regarding gifts and benefits. Part 6 allows gifts and benefits of a token value to be accepted. Gifts and benefits of a token value are one or more gifts or benefits received from a person or organisation over a 12-month period that do not exceed a value of $50. This is less than the currently specified in the Model Code of Conduct issued by the Office of Local Government that defines a token value as not exceeding $100. The proposed change to Part 6 is to reduce the value specified from $50 to $20. Council will take a thank you enough approach, which will be promoted to Council staff, community and suppliers, along with education about the changes to the token value amount. It's recommended that Council adopt the amendment to the Code of Conduct as outlined in attachment 1 to this report.
Thank you very much. In relation to item 9.25, Code of Conduct, I would move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 203 of the business paper and declare it carried. General Manager, Traffic Committee. I'm sorry, Investments. No. Pardon me. In relation to item 9.26, the investment report, I would move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 206 of the business paper and declare that carried. Traffic Committee on page 206, there's no introduction. I'm sorry, Traffic Committee on page 200 and 13. I appreciate the advices on page 214 in relation to cars and coffee, and I'm very confident that what's written there is correct, but I want the Traffic Committee to agree. This matter's not going to go away. So in relation to the Traffic Committee, I would move the officer's recommendation be adopted, subject to the clarification sought by Council in relation to Cars and Coffee monthly event being submitted to the next meeting of the committee. And I declare that carried. The next one is Country Mayors. I would move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 216 of the business paper and declare that carried. General Manager, is there any further business?
No further business, Mr May.
Thank you. I declare the meeting closed and thank everyone for their attendance.